right, so I'm going to be having two guests to have this conversation with me today. And in the studio, I have Mr. Abdullahi Saleh. He is a board member of Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All. He's also a political and an economic analyst. Welcome to Lens on Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Also on Zoom, I'll be having Tandong Callistus Jong. He's a development researcher and a food safety campaigner. He's joining us all the way from Cameroon. Hello, Tandong.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so gentlemen, we're going straight into our conversation talking about AU's theme for 2024, Skill for Africa, as well as Educating Africa. Now, I'm curious, why did the African Union decide to focus on education as a theme for the year and not agriculture?
Yes, I was also curious about that, but then going through the statistics, looking at the indices, and the issues bedeviling the African continent, we realized that well, the global community did realize that there was a need to focus on education, among many other issues bedeviling the continent. This came up sometime in September last year when the Secretary General of the the UN, came to this conclusion that if Africa, the issue of education is not being looked at, then there will be a global crisis. And therefore, he summoned a summit where all the African heads of states, most of them were there, to discuss the way forward. And looking at the issues, the constraints within the continent, we just realized that education is the only way out, and that we have targets and indicators for the SDG goals and the CESA, the Continental Education Strategy document, which guides what we do with regards to education. And the indicators are quite worrisome. We are lagging behind. And to get us back on track, we needed to discuss education as a continent.
As a continent. All right. Now, Tandong, do you have something to say to that before I throw in my next question? Because we're about to hit the ground running. Hello, Tandong.
Yes.
You have something to say to that?
I think if you go back, you look at the African Union have been talking about that. I think the team in 2014 team was a year of agriculture security. And you remember that we have what we call the African Union group that is called Comprehensive African Development Group, which in 2018, our head of states and government committed us 10% and 10% investment in agriculture. And in 2014, they were celebrating 10 years, 10 decades of implementation of Canada. And the year was being dedicated to agriculture. 20 years after talking about agriculture, the AUC and the Technocrat discovered that without education, we can achieve the agricultural transformation. I think that's why the team of this year is focusing on agriculture almost. I think they are.
All right, thank you very much for your contribution. However, I'd like to let you know that your connection is not 100% clear. Maybe you could move around a little bit and then get back to us so we can hear you clearly. We don't want to miss anything. Okay, now let's talk about specific challenges. What specific challenges do you think that the continent faces in achieving SDG 4, beg your pardon, saying as it is related to education, talking about inclusive, talking about equitable and quality education?
Well, there are quite a number of issues.
Yeah.
And one of the issues we realize is that there's a very high number of out-of-school children across the continent.
Yes.
Over 260 million, and Nigeria houses about 10% of that. That's very bad. That's a bad thing. And from the look of things, look at the issues coming up in the country and in the sub-region, you realize that a lot of children that are supposed to be in school are found committing crimes that you before now can't imagine. Banditry, kidnapping, petty theft, armed robbery. We're living with it here, even in the FCT. And as such, if something is not done about it, look at it from whatever dimension, whether from financing or providing security or good governance, whichever way, then the entire world will have to contend with that. Look at the mass migration through the north, going to Europe or whatever. What are the chances that Europe will not be in trouble? And I think that is why they feel quickly they need to awaken us to our responsibility of tackling this challenge. Number two, even though some children are in school, there's a learning crisis. They might be in school, but then ages 6 to 10 cannot construct basic English. What is wrong with our learning models? Number three, there's a dearth in number of teachers. I understand that Africa will need about 17 million teachers in the coming decade. If we do not work on that, then we can never meet the targets of the SDGs. And lastly, I think the funds required for that.
Okay.
And that is why the African presidents are meeting and are discussing the way forward with regards to mobilizing resources. But then I think we have a peculiar problem in our country, not just getting the resources, but also deploy the resources where they should be. The high level of corruption. Or I think again we have a problem with planning. We have a problem of getting the right people in the right places so that these the right things will be done so we can achieve these indicators. Because I don't think that totally that resources are our problems. We have a very good plan for Nigeria.
Could it be a problem of priority? Like, do we prioritize education as we ought to? I mean, talking about our country, Nigeria, in particular.
Well, that could be one of the problems. Because if the governors, who also have a large chunk of responsibility towards education, do see it as a priority to build more schools, to give attention to education, because already we have a very wonderful policy document, the UBEC Act, which states that education is compulsory and free. Now, what have we done to make sure that everybody goes to school, and that those that refuse to take their kids to school are being punished? Are the schools available? There was a research that was done by the Planning Commission. You see communities where there are children, but there are no schools. I have been to such communities. So government has been lagging behind in terms of providing the necessary infrastructure, in terms of building, providing the teachers, and then making that law, enforcing that law. We saw El Rufai do that in Kaduna to some extent. He achieved to some extent. How many other governors are following suit?
All right. Now let's I'm coming to you. Now, many African countries are dealing with crisis. Let's be very honest. And these crises are disrupting living. So how do you think this is directly affected? We mentioned out-of-school children. How do you think this is directly affected, children being out of school and the resultant effects that follow?
Yes, let me just take from my border. I think the issue of governance is a serious issue in Africa. I had opportunity to tour the continent, or at least all the 55 member states of the African Union. And what happened? You remember that 2021, the year was being dedicated on silencing the gods. And now we are still talking about crisis. Look at the
All right, sorry about that, Tandon. We could barely hear you. Your network was poor. Please do attempt and get back to us. We'd love to hear you. Still talking about...
Like you look at...
Oh, great. Great, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was explaining that if you look at the issues of the English minority crisis in Cameroon, you look at the issues of Boko Haram in northern Cameroon and northern Nigeria, look at the issues of Ethiopia and Eritrea, look at the issues of Sudan. All those concern man-made conflict, man-made crisis. Why? If we have good governance, it's easy for us to stop, to sit down and discuss like brothers. If we see the ideology, the dream of the founding fathers of Africa, why don't you sit on the table and discuss like brothers? Why do you suffer? I think I was carrying some research of the last month, December, I have to go to the communities. You see children with the crisis here in Cameroon, they have been for 7 years, 6 to 7 years without even seeing a classroom. So which generation are we building? Are we building which generation? A generation of deficit, or we are building a generation of production? So those are the critical things that we should be looking at. And I think African Union was supposed to go back and look. What happened that the 2021 team silenced the gun didn't work? What happened? Because of self-interest of the leaders, poor governance, or because we don't want to open or we don't want to work for our people. So those are very critical things. Until we start asking ourselves these very critical issues, critical questions, self-assessment questions, I think Africa, in terms of education, we are going nowhere.
All right, thank you so much. So now let's talk about technological advancement and innovation. Standong, let me ask you this while you're still online. Seeing as you just mentioned that there's some children in Cameroon who for 5 to 7 years have not seen a classroom, is there a way that we can use technology to reach people in far or underserved areas? Let me use that expression. Is there a way that even though they're not able to go to a physical school, that education can still be brought to them?
Yes, I think the issue of our technological providers, like internet providers. You remember that Africa own none of these internet providers. I think when you look at them, you look at all the networks. We have 4 networks as the local communities. I think they have a program here. So ministry, basic education and secondary education, try to do that. Okay. Children learning online. How can you learn online that you don't have a stable internet? How can you learn online that you don't have a stable internet? So it's a very good idea, very good plan on paper. But now, if you don't have a stable internet, how can you learn online? So those are the technological development that African Union needs to start bringing the member state around. Let us start looking about our own satellite. Can we own the satellite? Can we own the satellite so that will make internet affordable to rural communities? That will work on businesses, digital marketing, digital learning. So, but we don't own it. We don't own internet. We don't own the internet. We don't own this. We don't own the satellite. So how can we catch up with? Because we are really behind. We are behind. I mean, like the birth of Jesus Christ. We are Africans really behind when it comes to technological issues.
All right. Now let's talk about partnerships. We know that collective efforts amplify impact. The AU has, decided that this is the theme for the year. Let's come back to, focusing on education. Even though a school of thought says that Africa is playing catch up with the rest of the world, but we know that development is not uniform based on our peculiar situation. So talking about collective effort, talking about partnerships between the AU, the UN, agencies, NGOs, and just generally all of the stakeholders, what kind of roadmap do you foresee to help us get Africa to the place where it ought to be, talking about education and skills?
Yes, let me correct an impression. I think this theme didn't emanate from the African presidents. It was from the UN. They did the analysis and felt that we were lagging behind in education. I doubt if our presidents see it the way the UN sees it. And that's the beauty of the partnership. Because if these guys were not there to wake us up, then I think we will still be sleeping in our slumber and looking at things differently. I doubt if any of the African presidents, if left alone, will come up with this thinking that Africa is lagging behind because of education. Rather, they will tell you that we lack resources. And that's the problem we have with our leaders. They think that everything revolves around the funding, the finances we have. So partnerships are very important, and that is why I tell you what, without these basic partnerships in Nigeria, BESDA, Agile, followed by World Bank, and many other development partners, Nigeria would have been nowhere with regards to education, because the government, even with that, the government is still not ready to up their game with regards to education. One, our budgeting is very poor. The attention we give to teachers, very bad. When it comes to infrastructure, we're nowhere. I have been to UBEC several times to see what is happening with regards to building of more schools in rural communities. Yes, they're doing their best, but their best is not good enough because there are still many communities in Africa, in Nigeria particularly again, that are underserved when it comes to issues of providing infrastructure. And when you see what they provide, I don't think it's good for the 21st century learning. So there's a lot to be done. And I think we welcome the development partners, and I want them to assume a different role. Nigeria needs to develop homegrown solutions for our problems. The development partners cannot be the ones to teleguide us. I am happy. 2 weeks ago, I was with the Minister of State for Education here in one of your studios, and he did show us a roadmap developed for Nigeria. I haven't gone through the roadmap to see what exactly it is. It's one of the issues that I'm sure will be discussed at the AU. So could it be that they have gone ahead knowing what our problems are? Because we cannot wait for development partners to come and show us exactly what to do. I was in Maiduguri to enroll out-of-school children. I'm on the alternate school program, technical working group. And when I got to Maiduguri, I realized that there were many buildings across the state. Development partners came and built schools, but the schools are not in use. And I kept asking the question, why are the children not going into the schools? Teachers are not. Who would want to go to Maiduguri and work? So I think we are not putting things in their right perspective. African presidents need to come back, sit down at home, look at their problems dispassionately, and find a homegrown solution to their problems.
Talking about homegrown solutions, now I know that the school feeding program, was introduced in Nigeria.
It was borrowed also from other countries. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, isn't that a typical homegrown solution? That has that impacted enrollment? Has that impacted how do I put it, steady attendance? Has that impacted it in any way whatsoever?
Ideally, it should, because it had worked in other climes, in other countries. It had worked, and that is why we borrowed that and we came. But the implementation has been very poor. Now, let me tell you something. I'm a monitor. I've been monitoring education projects for more than 10 years. I have never been fortunate to see where school feeding was going on. And even on the alternate school program, we have a component for the school feeding to attract enrollment and retention. But I tell you what, you are in Nigeria and you've heard what has been going on. The corruption in the system. Now, these are the challenges we are facing. It's all about the funding. It's all about the policies. We have wonderful policies. The Ministry of Education has more than 10 policy documents to keep children in school. But then, what is the problem? So, yes, the Homegrown School Feeding Program is one good program. Thankfully, the president has moved it to Ministry of Education, so it doesn't remain. One of the palliatives, or but then it's going to be institutionalized. We're watching to see how it's going to come up. But then I think the civil society needs to be carried along so that we can also give them our own perspectives. But most importantly, I think governments need to be sincere in what they do.
All right, Tandang, still talking about homegrown solutions. The school feeding initiative, like he mentioned, is something that our country, Nigeria, borrowed. Is it something that has been implemented or is being looked at in Cameroon? And do you foresee it being a solution?
I think yesterday I have a discussion with the guys. I was in Yaoundé. I have a discussion with the guys at the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes.
We got what they call a national program on food security, and the guys talk about the school feeding program. They started and it failed. One of the issues is sustainability. We borrow from the West.
Yeah.
We put the resources together? Are we put the manpower together? Are we put the manpower? We borrow. Yeah, it's good to borrow. But do we have the facilities? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the finances? Because it's not all about finances. Do we have the manpower? We talk about school feeding. Yeah, it's good. So what type of quality of food? Unsafe food is not food. So the point that is very technical. That we have to talk about school feeding. You need a lot of things to put in place.
Yeah. From
health, checking whether the food is safe for consumption, or checking whether so those are the critical issues. Do we have the facilities? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the finances? So that becomes a very serious problem. I think the school feeding issue have created more problem than goods.
Oh, wow, interesting. All right, now let's pivot a little bit to talk about gender. We know that in Africa there is a dearth of female students in school because of beliefs. You know, of there's still some people who do not see the full value of a girl child. So, what strategies do you think that African leaders can put in place to encourage full participation in the education that is even available at this time?
Thank you very much. I think we need continuous awareness,
Okay.
sensitization among communities. We have enough policy documents. I won't ask for more policies, but I'll ask for enforcement of those
Of those
policies.
ones, okay.
You cannot have a policy document which states that education is compulsory, and kids are not going to school, and nothing is being done about
About
it.
it.
Traditional rulers should be given a role to play within this context because they are the custodian of the people's culture. So if you talk about cultures, norms, or whatever that is hindering the girl child from going to into school, I think the best people to tackle that will be the community leaders, including including religious leaders, talking to both the Christian and the Muslim faith. Otherwise, we will hit the rocks. And I tell you what, I wouldn't say that the girl child in the recent past has been denied education. I think my biggest worry is providing the conducive atmosphere for learning. A girl cannot be sent out with this situation. You know, we talked about safe school declaration, where schools should be made safe. But are schools safe with the kidnapping in the schools, with the bullying, with the you know, a lot of issues we need to contend with within the African continent and in Nigeria in particular. So yes, I think government needs to up their game in providing infrastructure so that the girl child can also feel safe to come to school.
All right, Tandang, I'm coming to you, and this will be the last question in this segment because of time. Now let's talk about balancing the divide between traditional education and modern skills that are needed for the 21st century. Tandang, what do you think? Where should our leaders begin from?
I think we should borrow from countries like China, like Japan, and other countries.
Okay.
If you look around the continent of Africa, we admire Rwanda. I have been in Rwanda, my first time over 6 months. You need to go to Rwanda. The point with us is that we don't send people to go and learn. The technology have advanced. We have we are focused on training here and training young generation, giving them certificate to be waiting for government. Why are we not training people who can create jobs themselves? Why are we not training entrepreneurs? Why are we training job seekers? We are supposed to be training job providers.
Job providers. Sorry to interrupt you there, Tandang. You mentioned Rwanda. Why in particular?
Yes, I think when you look at Rwanda in terms of technology, in terms of advanced education in science and technology, I think it's different in Africa. So it should be a reference. It should be a reference point.
Okay.
That, you look at the children from we call it here basic education from primary. You see what the things that they are doing. They have all the facilities. The facilities have been put, the materials have been given to them. Why other member states are not borrowing from? We are talking about transformation of agriculture transformation. How can we transform with certificate? Can we use certificate to transform? We can only transform, only entrepreneurs can transform agriculture in Africa, can transform Africa, can boom economy. So we should now look at our education curriculum. I think we have outdated education curriculum in Africa that is as old as the age of Jesus Christ. So why can't our education, why can our technocrats go back and look? How can we now design curriculum that will solve the issues of Africa? Until we start looking at that angle, renovating or to really see what we can do, what have not worked in our education curriculum. Look at the African problems. Design the curriculum in a way that can fit to solve the solutions in Africa, then our education in Africa will have no value.
Thank you so much for that take. He brought it down to the curriculum. We need to go back to the basics and see that there's an upheaval. There's a total overhaul. In that way, whatever education we're giving to our children is compliant with the 21st century. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I've been speaking with Abdullahi Saleh. He's a board member of Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All. He's also a political and economic analyst. Thank you so much for your time. I've also had Tandong Kalistus Jong, a development researcher and food safety campaigner, joining in from Cameroon. Thank you, gentlemen, for making this interview interesting.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Tandong,
Thank you.
thank you very much.